Hello, Joanna. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you have a lot of accomplishments. And as you said before our conversation, you feel like you have lived several lives. So that's something that we will try to squeeze that in and get the most value out of it. So I understand you're CBT and EMDR therapist, and you have 4 degrees in psychology and psychotherapy.
Yes.
That's really impressive. Can you tell where did this passion started? Because I assume that you're passionate about this from our previous conversation. Um, how did this journey started for you?
So very early in life, I think that I was 10 years old and I kind of knew what I wanted to do in life. I remember, I think I was 10 or 11, and we had a school play and I played psychiatrist there. And I kind of felt really good in that role. And I knew that I wanted to be a psychotherapist. I wanted to have my private practice. I wanted to help clients. I always found that very rewarding. So it was quite early when I realized that this is what I want to do. It took some time to build things, and I think that that's why I did all these degrees, just to get the knowledge, to have skills and tools to help people. 3 degrees were very related to my clinical work, and I really wanted to improve skills. I did CBT training. One of the masters is postgraduate diploma is in CBT. I did existential counseling psychology, and then the first degree was in psychology. But the last degree I did for fun, and it was in sport and exercise psychology, and it was something that my sister's friend, she told me that when I was 19, I told her that when she asked me about psychology, which part of psychology I'm interested in, I told her sports psychology, and I was like very adamant about that. And I somehow, I was going through life and I forgot about it. And then I remembered it somewhere around, I think I was just approaching 40. And you know how like you evaluate your life, like when you approach 30 or 30th or 40th birthday. And I was thinking, okay, this is something that I wanted to do in the past. I'm still interested in that. I love sports. I love the idea of people becoming the best that they can be. And whenever I attend sporting events, when I see how much human body is capable of doing, then I'm always so impressed. And I know that sport is as well a lot of that kind of mental preparation and grit and determination and so on. So I did that degree for fun, and it was actually fun. And I enjoyed studying, and it's very different when you study, when you don't have the pressure, when it's you just doing that for yourself because you are curious, rather than you have to do it so then you can have a job and so on.
Wait, so how many degrees does it take for you to be officially a psychologist? Because I myself, I have bachelor's in sports psychology, and I know I can't really call myself psychologist or therapist because it's, like it's literally like illegal for me to do that.
Yes, I think that it's very regulated, because I think that to become psychotherapist, I believe that you need master's degree in psychotherapy. To become clinical psychologist, you need doctorate in clinical psychology, or you can have doctorate in counseling psychology, and it's very similar, I think, to clinical psychology. In psychiatry, of course, you need to have medical background. So, and I think that the easiest route is like to do counseling degree, or I mean, that requires the least studying. Sometimes it's like 1 year course. And I think that term counselor is not protected. So actually anyone can call themselves counselors, which is quite scary. On one hand, but I think that as well it gives some opportunity for people who they do have a lot of life experiences, and they can really bring quite a lot in terms of helping clients, but they don't want to go down the route of years of studying. So that's the difference. And I still, with my degree, master's in sport and exercise psychology, yes, I wouldn't be able to call myself sports psychologist, which is I think quite funny, because I've got I've got more skills than average sports psychologist. So, and I've seen that through the training when I was doing at the university, that I had more clinical experience than some of my lecturers. So it's just the regulations, but this is how it is.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how even some people that I know who are coaches, a lot of times when people go to them, they say that I have tried therapists and things like that. Nothing that didn't really work for me, and they would be really skeptical about going to them. But then after a few sessions, they're like, "Oh, this is like really helpful." So I think it really, in a way, it might even depend on the person, because somebody might have a lot of degrees, but either don't have enough experience or something like that to be at that level, where somebody else might have a lot of experience, but at the same time not as much that like honors, not understand, but like the degrees and things like that. And
degrees, they don't make you smart. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's really important to have them, because even when it comes to, that's a big thing that I learned during my bachelor's, that there's a lot of I think ethics, like regulations around that, because let's say for somebody who is a coach, you don't have it at that level, because there are so many things that you need to keep in mind. And you probably can talk more on this, but it's because I assume it's because you work with people who literally have probably not necessarily in sports psychology, but if you work with traumas and PTSD, things like that, that's not an easy subject to work with, and you can't really approach it lightly, because it can be really damaging for a person just to even address that. So I think that might be one way how that is actually really helpful to have that education. But maybe you can talk more on this.
I think that it is about the awareness and kind of not feeling that you are a god and you can work with anything. It's just, I think that the degrees give you awareness about the certain tools that you can use, and as well limitations, and as well some exclusion criteria and so on. And I think that I've learned the hard way. I think that working with trauma, there is something about, I think, how it started. When I was training, when I was doing masters in existential counseling, counseling psychology, I had to volunteer at different places and deliver counseling sessions. And I had one client who was refugee, and he was traumatized, and I didn't know how to work with trauma then. My supervisor was aware of the situation, but she didn't do anything about it. She kind of left me there working with someone who was traumatized, severely traumatized. And I always had the feeling that it was just wrong. I wasn't the person to be there. The person probably felt that it didn't help them as much as it could. So, you kind of create a situation when someone says, well, I tried therapy, but it didn't help. Now, as I know exactly what I need to do in terms of treating trauma, and I've got almost 100% recovery rate. So it is like really, really high for single trauma, not for complex trauma. But
what is the usual rate?
It varies, but the rates that I've got are extremely high. I don't have many friends. I don't have any friends who are therapists who have such a high recovery rates, as measured by one questionnaire, IESR questionnaire. This is a questionnaire that measures post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think that I just developed my own way. I had all the tools and skills throughout the training, how to work with trauma, but I kind of made it my own way. I kind of adjust things. Some things didn't make sense that we were trained to do. We were trained, for example, to, when you've got traumatized client, to explain to them where trauma is coming from and use the words like amygdala, thalamus, frontal lobes, and so on. And you've got in front of you a client who has been traumatized, who's barely keeping it together, and you start saying all these big words, it's not going to work. You have to have a different explanation that is like simple, straightforward, plain English. So there was a lot of in training things that just didn't make sense. So I adjust them, and I came up with the treatment that actually I'm in the process of developing an online course to train therapists how to work with trauma. Because I think that I don't want to hold on to what I found be useful and effective. I need to spread that word, and I need to contribute, I think, to the knowledge in terms of how to treat trauma.
Yeah, and that's huge topic, trauma, because to some extent we all have had it or have had some experience. Have you, in your experience working with people who have gone through trauma, what would you say are the most like common things they, or like challenges that they deal with?
Well, I think that first of all, you don't understand what happened to you. And in terms of like when you get flashbacks, when you've got certain triggers that put your body into that kind of panic state, it's different. Depression, I think that majority of the people had depression or anxiety, or the friends had, or family member had, so that you're kind of familiar with that. But with trauma, and particularly PTSD, when I'm saying about flashbacks and so on, I mean like severe case of trauma. When people experience PTSD, you are surprised about, the symptoms. You are not able to sleep, or your sleep is broken. You might have flashbacks not only as images, but as well as physical sensations, or sometimes people have smells. Like if someone was in a car accident, they might have the flashback of the smell of burning like tires or something like that, rubber, or so it might be like various symptoms. And I think that people, they just don't know what happened to them. So that's one of the things. Second thing, that they don't teach us at school how to deal with those things, which I think that they should teach us, how to deal with depression, what to do when you're anxious, developing coping skills, mindfulness. It would be probably much more useful than learning about sinus and cosinus in maths, which I'm still waiting to use it in life and haven't happened yet. So I think that those are the things that people struggle with. And people who experience complex trauma, they struggle even more, because they've got complex trauma is something that happened to people over a prolonged period of time. So single trauma, it's something like car accident, or someone being raped, or I don't know, someone being attacked. Complex trauma, we are talking about, for example, neglect, severe neglect when someone was a child, or abuse, sexual abuse that happened over years or months. And complex trauma, I think that it's much more difficult to treat, because people, they struggle with the emotional regulation. They've got problems negotiating then the intimate relationships. There is sexual risky behavior, or sexual shutdown. So there is like much more things, complex things. And I think that with single trauma, when I worked with single trauma, then usually it takes me up to maximum 8 sessions to process that and to get rid of all the symptoms. With complex trauma, yes, I can help someone to to feel less negative about what happened to them, and reduce any kind of negative emotions related to the past. But still they are left with that kind of dysregulation in terms of their emotions. And this is a hard work. And I think that as well, if you've been experiencing something traumatic over a prolonged period of time, then you've got this syndrome of learned helplessness, which you probably know from psychology. It's like when they were doing tests on dogs, and it was very cruel dogs. They wouldn't do that nowadays, but it was in the past, when the dog was in the cage and they would electrocute the dog, and the dog could escape the the shock by going to another part of the cage. But then what they started doing, that no matter what the dog did, he would still, or they would still be electrocuted. And at the end, the dogs, they became very passive. They were lying, and they were just not doing anything, because they knew no matter what I do, I'm not going to escape the negative effect. And sometimes this is what happens to people when they experience something traumatic. When you are young and you are, for example, abused, or you are physically beaten or sexually abused, and no matter what you try, nothing works, it still happens to you. You kind of learn, well, no matter what I do in life, the bad things will come to me. I've got no control to avoid that. So this is quite a difficult part of the treatment, and how to teach someone that actually they do have control, and they can do something about their lives, and that every day that they wake up, they've got a choice in terms of whether they are going to try to make their life better. And I do believe that we we have the power to create the life that we want. But sometimes it is difficult if you've got that kind of learned helplessness, then, it's quite difficult on your own to come out of it.
With the learned helplessness, could there be a link with identity? Do they now start to identify as victim or?
Yes, I think that you are spot on here. Yes, then I always think about this kind of story that we can have different attitudes in life. And there is my supervisor once, she told me this a metaphor, like imagine a boat, and the boat starts sinking, and there are two sailors on the boat, and one sits down on the deck and starts lamenting and saying, oh my God, why is this always happening to me? Why me? It's always me. And the other person starts running around and is like, shit happens. Where are safety boats? And trying to find a safety boat. So you've got the same situation, but two different attitudes. And I think that that's the problem, that people sometimes they do go into that victim mentality, and they start asking questions, why is it happening to me? Why always me? And so on, rather than thinking, okay, how can I make my life better? What can I do in this moment, if it's a small thing, to change things? But it's easier said than done. So, it's very difficult to be actually or experience trauma and then change the way of thinking. It's possible though. And I think that this is what a lot of people, they don't realize, that with a little bit of work, with a little bit of motivation, you can overcome that, and you can become, what they say, from victim to victor.
Yeah. And I think it's really good that you mentioned a little bit of work, because I think a lot of times we think that, okay, for me now to change, I have to make huge steps. I have to make a lot of change, but it's not really sustainable, and you will feel like really overwhelmed. But if you start with these small steps, that's where you can start to see that change, and you can actually sustain it. Where also your maybe past identity doesn't fight against you too much. But the really interesting thing that I talked to one transformational coach who is I think she was on episode 20 or 21, Liza Tickle, and with her we were talking about a really interesting thing, because she's mainly working with women who have gone through some kind of abuse. And she said that really interesting thing was that some people, they have this victim mindset, they go in this victimhood, but the other side is where there's a lot of people who go into rebellion, that they now let's say they want to prove that I'm not a victim, I'm this and that. Can you talk more on this, like diversity or different reactions to that?
Well, I'm thinking that it's, it's quite my first gut feeling when you said that. I was thinking that kind of rebellion, it's not necessarily a good thing as well, because it's sometimes you are trying to prove something and you are still guided by the pain or by the things that happen to you. And I think that it's different choosing to be happy, and it's different to rebel. I don't want to be a victim, because then I don't know, that's my just gut feeling.
Because in a way you're now trying to, that's where I was heading, because now when you rebel, you actually try to prove that you're not the victim. And if you have to, it's similar. Then I think about confidence as well. If you now have to walk around and say that you're confident, you're trying to prove that you're confident. So are you really confident if you have to prove that? And that's how that's where I was headed with being like rebellious, where it might seem like, oh, this person might be coping better, but actually maybe they are trying to hide that pain that they're actually feeling, because they don't want others to see that what is it they're going through.
Well, it is, I think that it takes away some kind of choice from you, because then your choice will be guided by you wanting something to prove. And I'm thinking about one person that I've met. He was a French guy. He came to UK to work, and his choice was guided by what his teacher told him at school once, where he told him, well, at one of the English lessons, he said, oh, you will never learn English, you will, that is something that you can forget about. And he was so hurt by that he was like, no, I'm going to prove my teacher wrong. And then he was in his 30s in England trying to prove his teacher, who wouldn't even remember that, and wouldn't even care. And I felt that it kind of taken away his choice in terms of like, where would he, maybe he would prefer to go, I don't know, somewhere with a nicer weather, or, you know, if he didn't have that kind of chip on his shoulder somehow. So I think that in that sense, it takes away actually your choice.
Yeah. And with choice, it might also take away your freedom, because now you feel like you're stuck in this path that you feel like you have to go on to prove this person wrong. But really interesting thing that you said is guided choice. Can you explain this? Because that's something that I haven't heard it put this way before. So what is it that is guiding our choices? Or because I also wrote down the power of choice, because that is something that I think it's such a seemingly simple thing, but once you realize that you actually have choice, it's really powerful.
Well, it's, I think that the whole philosophical, you know, question, how much choice do we have actually? And I think that, you know, there are so many components like contributing to that, our upbringing, our physically how we feel, our circumstances, and so on, so on. There's so much that it's quite difficult to say, but I think that there are some certain situations when it's like obvious, where our choices are guided by certain things, like example that I gave, and it's not necessarily a choice. It's trying to prove something, but it's not that you've got the whole pool of different options to choose from, and you think, oh, which one I'm going to enjoy the most. It's like, which one is going to prove that, you know, I actually can learn English, and so on. So in that sense.
And also that made me think about social situations where a lot of times somebody who doesn't feel comfortable in social situations, they feel like, or they might tell themselves that they're making choice not to go. And that is something that I feel technically it's not really a choice, because you probably choose something that you're comfortable with, not being around people that I don't know, or not feeling or dealing with this maybe anxiety or negative emotions that I feel that I'm with people. But when it comes to being in social situations, that's something that I heard when I was researching you. Heard you talk a lot about. And I think that's also, I noticed even like with COVID, with all this like isolation and lockdowns, things like that, that once I would get out, even to the store, I could literally feel that I have higher anxiety just doing basic things that I didn't really like feel any anxiety when I was doing before. So how can somebody deal with, well, getting out of isolation, or just starting to approach more social situations?
I think that you experience something that a majority of the people experience, in terms of, I even felt going to the shops like, oh, people around, and you know, it's all bigger gatherings. So I think that is quite natural. I think that the social anxiety, the main cause of social anxiety, usually lies within self-esteem. There are certain situations like post-COVID that, of course, we're going to feel slightly anxious because we haven't done things for some time. And whenever we do something that we haven't done for some time, or we do a thing that we're doing it for the first time, there are going to be certain levels of anxiety there. But I think that social anxiety, when you start avoiding social situations, when there are certain behaviors that you do, and sometimes people, for example, before social situations, they practice conversations in their head, or they come up with questions that they can ask, or they, when they walk into the room, they place themselves close to the door so they know that the exit is there, or they would make excuses to leave earlier social situations. Or the common one, where people leave social situations, they start ruminating over what was said and how they interacted, and they think, oh, when someone said this, I should have said that, and not this, and what do they think about me? Or they will think that I'm weird, or I said something stupid, and they cannot sleep, because, you know, this is what they are thinking about, and they break it into small pieces and analyze everything. So social situations, I think that the best way to start working on feeling confident in them is start working on self-esteem. And there is a lot of resources available. If you go on YouTube, you can find some. If you go on WikiHow and research how to improve self-esteem, I do have a course on Udemy, Reinvent Yourself by Boosting Self-Esteem, that is focused on that. But there are plenty of other courses as well. You can work with therapy. So the choices are the books as well. There is a great book, Overcoming Low Self-Esteem by Melanie Fennell. So that's another option. And it is for everyone in terms of different budgets and so on. So there is no excuse, basically. And I think that will help you to feel more confident and worry less about being judged by others. Because I think that the social situations, it's the situation when we feel exposed, when we feel that others, they might notice our shortcomings, or we do worry what they think about us. And if it becomes excessive, then it's going to spoil the whole social interactions for us. And as human beings, we do want to interact. We are, of course, on some kind of continuum. Some people, they might be introverted, so they require less those kind of social interactions. Some extroverts, they require more. But we do need that social networks and feeling connected to others, to community.
So technically, if we don't really have an excuse to start working on this, what is it that is stopping people from starting to work on that?
Well, one of the things, if you've got low self-esteem, you think that you are not worthy or that you are not good enough. And sometimes you don't make the best choices for yourself. So often what happens when people, they've got low self-esteem, they will get stuck in the job that they don't like or that is not well paid. They won't ask for a raise. They won't apply for better jobs because they worry about interviews, or they think, oh, I won't be able to do this job, even though they would be perfectly capable of doing some different jobs. They might get into relationships that are not the best for them because they think, oh, I won't find anyone better because who will want me? So I think that that's the difficult part, how to encourage people to start working on their self-esteem when they feel that they are not worthy, that they are not good enough, and they don't make those choices. They don't want to almost, or they not want to, they struggle in making good choices and improving their lives. So I think that that's one of the things. And as well as with anything else, you know, as human beings, we don't like change. If we think about working on something, we're like, oh, work. And then we kind of, we wish that we could have like a magic wand and change things. And one day we wake up and we are like feeling confident in ourselves. We love ourselves. We can go into social situations. We can do public speaking and so on. But it just doesn't happen like that. It is, as we said before, small steps. And I think that we underestimate how much actually we can achieve sometimes. I always think about when I talk about doing those small steps, and I think that that's another thing that people, when they think about working on self-esteem, that overwhelms them. They think, oh my God, you know, I will have to spend hours and hours in the week to do things to help myself. But actually, you can improve self-esteem by doing some exercises, just 1 or 2 minutes a day, and that's it. And I might actually share one thing here.
Oh, sure.
One thing that people can do. One of the things that that is quite powerful and changes our chemistry in the body. It raises our testosterone levels and reduces our cortisol levels. Testosterone is making us more confident, and cortisol is reducing cortisol means that it reduces our stress levels, is doing power poses. And I don't know if you came across TED Talk, Amy Cuddy, I believe, she did a TED Talk on power poses. Yeah, Wonder Woman, when you place your hands on the hips, or a winner, you know, like crossing the finish line, raising your hands. The boss, that kind of, and sit in the chair like that. So those are 3 different poses that you can use, and they found that if you do them for a couple of minutes, then you're going to, for example, come across if you've got interview and you do the power pose 2 minutes before the interview, you're going to come out better at the interview, and people are more likely to hire you. You can do that as well before social situations. You can do that on a daily basis, just to feel a little bit better about yourself. So, you know, it doesn't require that much work. And when I say as well about small steps, then I always think about this one example, what happens with, and actually, as we are in November and we're approaching the end of the year, so people will be thinking about their goals for the new year.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they will think, okay, next year, this is the time when I'm starting to work on my body, and I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week. And so what they do, they sign up to local gym, get gym membership for a year because it's cheaper. And then what they do, first week in January, they might go those 4 times to the gym. Second week, maybe. Third week, you know, life happens. So it was raining, I was tired after work, friend pop in, so yeah, for a coffee, or, you know, like 10,000 different excuses. And they maybe go to the gym only once. And then they say to themselves, well, I failed. So, you know, what's the point? And at the beginning of the January, gyms are heaving. At the end of January, empty, or, you know, back to normal. And I think that it's the difference how you set the goals. If you set to yourself that my goal is actually to go to the gym once a week, and that's it. For the next 2 months, January, February, I'm going to the gym once a week. During those 7 days, you're more likely to find one day when you're going to feel a little bit more motivated, when the weather is better, and so on, where you actually get yourself to the gym. And then after 2 months, then you say, okay, yeah, I've done it. So maybe I will add 1 more day. For another 2 months, you go to the gym twice, and it became already your habit, or you are used to it. You are feeling good because you're achieving your goals. And then after 4 months, you're saying, okay, one more day, and I'm going to go to the gym. And then by 6 months, you are able to go 3-4 times to the gym. And, you know, it didn't feel like hard work because you build it gradually. And I think that that's the trick that, you know, we often, when in therapy, when we work with clients and we try to activate them to do something, we ask them, oh, how many times in the week you would like to do that? And clients are straight away, every day or 5 days a week. And we say, okay, we're going to at least have it. You know, whatever you think, we are, like, as human beings, too optimistic to think how much we can do. So just have it, or make it a smaller goal. And I think that that's the trick, and that's the advice for people. If you think that you can do something so many times in the week or so on, just have the number or make it a smaller goal, and then gradually build on that.
That is, I can't agree more. And one thing that I have noticed is, even if you set, let's say, to do it gym once a week, during those 2 months, because you're now accomplishing that goal every week, you might actually want to do more, even while you have this goal of doing it once a week, because you feel this sense of accomplishment. And that is something that I, even as we were speaking, I was thinking about how when we make this entry point to start to make this action really small, usually I say that ideally you want to make it so small that it seems ridiculous not to be able to do it. Like it's even like when it comes to, I don't know, let's say meditate 1 minute. Like you can find 1 minute, and instead of meditate for like 30 minutes, and then it's like, I don't want to do it, or like I can't really do it every day. And that's why and there was a really interesting thing that I think it was the author of Atomic Habits that was talking about it. I don't remember who was talking about it, but it was so good, where he said about setting a goal where, let's say when it comes to gym, I think in this case it was about every day, but all you had to do is show up. You can literally, if you feel anxious or you don't want to do the workout or whatever, show up and leave. You don't even have to do the workout. And he said that the person who was doing that, I don't know the numbers, but like they lost a lot of weight, because when you start to show up, you initially build this habit of what matters the most is to show up. Instead of, now I'm going to do like hour workout on every day. Now you have to think about how much do I want to get, especially when you're like, when you wake up in your comfortable bed in the warmth, let's say during the winter, do I want to go outside to the gym and do 1 hour workout? Not really. But if you have this goal to just show up, you're like, okay, I don't feel like doing the workout, but like I just have to show up. I'm gonna show up.
Mm.
Then that entry is so small that now as you start to show up, you start to actually, as you said, like get in that habit. And now you start to enjoy that in a way, like you start to enjoy that process, because that's something that I was talking about in previous episode with Dr. Rob, that and he has I think PhD in sports psychology. And we were talking about that. I already forgot what we were talking about, what I was about to say. But it was such a good point. Okay. I might
It will come
remember.
back. It will come back.
Yeah. But I wanted to speak on what you said about and that's something that I heard you talk about, where when you go through this, when you work with people and they get this recovery from trauma, and I think you also mentioned your experience where you're going through depression and you haven't really had experience where you get it back. And that's something that I feel is really powerful, where let's say there's somebody who's dealing with anxiety, let's say social anxiety. They deal with social anxiety, they go and treat it, but then at some point they either still have it at smaller level, or they feel like it's coming back in like certain situations. But I think from what I understood is that the people that you work with, their trauma literally like goes away and doesn't really come back. Can you explain this more, or did I understand it right?
In terms of particularly single trauma,
Yeah.
in terms of complex trauma, yes, I can
Mhm.
reduce the distress when people think about the
Okay.
memories, and so they can think about it, and you almost become you can think about your past memories, traumatic memories, and it feels like you thinking about what you had for breakfast, no
Mhm.
emotions whatsoever. And I think that that one way to do that is EMDR treatment, but actually not even EMDR treatment. I would say bilateral stimulation, because I've got some issues with EMDR treatment as a treatment. I think that it's not necessarily what helps, but one component of it, bilateral stimulation, is the thing that actually helps.
So how does that look like?
So
Can you explain it a bit more?
Bilateral stimulation is when we stimulate different parts of the brain. So sometimes what happens that when we experience something traumatic, we've got in one part of the brain, there is the memory stored, or some kind of fragmented, I don't know, sensation or audio. In one part of the brain, there is this memory that is stored that hasn't been processed. It's like just snapshot, fragmented, and sometimes it gets activated, for example, in our dreams, or and we experience nightmares, or when we hear something that reminds us about our trauma, or when we see something similar on TV that evokes in us response, like an anxious response. But in another part of the brain, we've got information that we survived, it's not happening anymore, that we are, as safe, or some people, they are safe, actually. Some people, they are still maybe in some danger, but we've got this kind of information, the end of the trauma, that we survived, it's not happening anymore, we are safe. And those are disconnected. And by stimulating different parts of the brain, we are able to connect those two things together. In terms of bilateral stimulation, from the practical point of view, how it looks like, it's us moving eyes, for example, from side to side, as simple as that. That activates different parts of the brain. If you look to the right, left side of the brain is activated. If you look to the left, right side of the brain is activated. Another thing is as well auditory. So sometimes we might play a sound going from one ear to another, or tapping, tapping someone's
shoulder. I saw a video
shoulders.
where they were doing like this.
That is called butterfly hug, and you do it interchangeably.
Oh yeah.
And I think that you can see even Harry doing that in one of the sessions that he did with some therapists. And it is as well bilateral stimulation, and it is very nice and grounding, calming technique, but it can be used for processing as well. I think that the eye movement works the quickest, maybe, and sometimes I pair it with the auditory sound, and I think that that's probably the quickest way that I found. But people vary, and some people will respond more to tapping or just audio. So it varies.
I wonder why. Could there be a link between the fact that I heard Dr. Andy Huberman talk about how eyes are actually part of our brains? So if you use eyes, could that be more helpful to kind of bridge that gap between those two sides, if eyes are technically like part of your brain?
Don't know.
Yeah. It's just
Don't know.
something that
I don't know enough about anatomy
yeah.
in that sense to be able to answer that question, but possibly maybe that's the explanation why I found that when you do eye movements, it works just slightly quicker. That might be, but I cannot say anything about that. I don't have enough knowledge.
Okay.
Despite of all my degrees, so that's a good example.
And that's again, like, that's just an example. And one thing that I wanted to mention even before you were talking, when you were talking about all the education that you have had, is that the more you learn, the more you start to see that how much more you can learn. Mm-hmm. And that way you start to see that there's so much knowledge to acquire and learn, that the further you go, I think there was this like graph of how we learn, or at some point we feel like we're an expert, but then you start to learn more and you're like, oh, actually there's so much more to learn, and you become more humble as a result, hopefully. I also wanted to touch on the importance of people around you, so friends, family, and I think mainly friends, because I think those are the people that in a way we have an option to choose, or how, like, people that we want to surround ourselves with. And I also heard you mention the importance of people around you, which in a way I understand myself as well, both from life experience and things that I have learned. How do you choose your friends? Not you necessarily, but let's say, or you too, I don't know, but like, what is a good way to choose your friends, or what are the things that somebody should pay attention to when they are thinking whether it's to be friends with somebody or not?
I think that it's a simple evaluation. Do you enjoy spending time with someone? Yeah. Do they bring something in your life? Do you value them, learn from them, and so on? And that's some examples, easy questions. If you have friends that drain you, or you feel that they put you down, or you feel they bring some negativity in your life, teach them. And I do reviews of my friends, and I choose who I spend time with. I prefer to invest in the friendships and relationships that make me feel good, make me a better person, that we've got something in common. We can do fun stuff, we can share some experiences, we can learn from each other, and so on, and we enjoy each other's company, rather than being stuck with some friends because they were my friends some years ago, but now it just doesn't work. I don't think that it's worth it. I think that it's better if you use all the energy that you would use on them to actually build and strengthen the good friendships and relationships that you have. And as you said, friends is something that we can choose. Family is something that we can choose, but we can choose how much time we spend with family, and sometimes that's the tough choices that we have to make.
How does somebody, let's say, when it comes to letting some friends go, I think it might be a challenge for somebody who is like people pleaser, to do that. Especially, it might not be only people pleasing, but even somebody who has a challenge to say no or reject or something like that. How can somebody with those, I don't know the right word, it's not really traits, I think, because I want to say the right language, because I know how important it is, especially when the more you understand the science, the more you start to see the importance of using the right words. But like, how does somebody who has this kind of experience, or they have this challenge to say no, or let go people, things like that, how do they deal with that when they know that this is a friend that they're not really adding value to me?
It's again small steps. And in my course on Udemy, actually, I've got the whole module on how to stop being people pleaser and learn how to say no. And
which of the courses?
Reinvent yourself by boosting self-esteem. And the thing is that you need to start practicing it, saying no, maybe in situations that are less threatening, just so you can get familiar and comfortable with saying no. It might be simple situations with people that you feel comfortable with your family, saying no, and so on. And then when you build the confidence, then start doing that with this particular friend. But the important thing is that when you say no, don't give excuses, because people can poke holes in excuses. It's so easy to do if you say, I cannot meet with you because I'm doing something, and then someone say, oh, when are you doing, where are you going, and so on, so on. And if you start lying as well, you're not going to feel good about yourself. And I think that the idea is that you build the assertiveness and that you feel good about yourself. And lying never works. Like, I don't believe in lying and even finding excuses. I think that I've read somewhere that no is a complete sentence. But sometimes you can soften the blow as well in terms of no. And you can say, I don't know, if someone asks you, could you please help me tomorrow to move my sofa or something? You might say, no, but thank you for asking me. Thank you for thinking that, I was the best person to do the job, or something like that. So, you don't give the excuses, but you're kind of thanking someone for actually thinking highly of you, or asking you and thinking that you can do their job, and so on, so on. And then, they cannot be upset with you, basically, when you think that. And they cannot say anything after that. So it's just about learning the ways, what feels comfortable for you. But I think that it is important to start working on that, because otherwise you're going to waste life hanging out with friends that are going to drag you down or drain you, and you're not going to have energies to do stuff that you were put on this planet to do, and spending as well time with people who are good for you and who are important.
Yeah. And really important thing that I was thinking about as you were speaking was that, in a way, people treat us the way we allow them or teach them to treat us. So if you are always available, you always say yes, at some point people just start to expect you to say yes. And if you say no, you might get that reaction like, what's happening? Why are you saying no? It doesn't make sense. You always say yes. So I think what you said about that's really interesting, not interesting, but like, it's a really good point that when you start, even from the beginning, not always say no, but still at least sometimes say no, so that those people can actually learn that you're not always available, or you actually say no as well. It's an option, or it's like a part of your vocabulary. And that's a really interesting thing that I learned is, and then when I would look at relationships with people around me, I started to see that, oh, it makes sense. People have because I was definitely like a people pleaser, always saying yes, things like that, helping everybody and all this jazz. And I would feel a lot of, I think, like guilt when I would say no, because at some level I would feel like I'm not really allowed to say no, or things like that. And then one of my friends really helped me with this, where he was like, just say no. Like, you have really nothing to lose. And an important thing is that if you say no and that person reacts a certain way, it actually says more about them than you. Exactly. Because if they're not able to deal with you saying no, actually, like, it's in a way they're now kind of like dependent on you doing certain things, which it's important for you to teach them not to be dependent. But that's a really interesting dynamic, how it works, where I know that for a really long time it was a big challenge. And one thing that I learned also is that if you're not able to say no, then when you say yes, you now actually start to resent your friends, because now you go and do things that technically you don't really want to do, but your friends feel good about it, or like whatever, you want to build this like friendship or stuff like that. And at the same time, you actually start to resent them as people, just because you struggle to say no. But then once you start to say no, actually you might improve that friendship as a result.
Exactly, spot on. And one of the things that I say, when before saying or agreeing to something, you can always buy yourself time, and you can say, let me think about it. And what you can do, that you can actually ask yourself questions. Is it something that I want to do? Will it leave me feeling resentful? of my friends, or you can ask those questions and evaluate based on that. Do I have time? If I say yes, will that mean that I have to give up something from my needs or from myself, or any plans that I made for myself? And those are the simple questions to evaluate whether to agree to something or not. And I think that helping others can be a very nice and enjoyable thing, and it leaves us feel good. But if it doesn't, if we feel that it's a chore, if we feel that if we resent that, then what's the point? Why are you making yourself miserable?
And another really interesting thing that I learned from my own experience is that there would be a time when, because I also had like low self-esteem, where I would help somebody, but I wouldn't really help necessarily. Well, I like to help, but at the same time, I would look at it as a way, unconsciously probably, how to make myself feel good about myself. Because from the inside of me, I didn't really have that self-esteem or confidence about myself, things like that. So now I started to seek, where can I help? Because then once I help, this person might appreciate me, and now I start to feel good about myself. And you go in this cycle where at some point you like start to believe that I can't really say no, because if I say no, now I'll feel bad about myself. Or you start to associate that if I say no, I won't have this like boost of feeling good about myself. And then again, like it's even like helping people with this expectation that you have to thank me. Like they don't, not necessarily, because it's your choice to help. You can always say no, because help is not something that you are obligated to do. That's why I think it's called help. You can ask somebody for help. You can't force somebody to help you, because then that's not really helping. But maybe as we close off, maybe you can describe the difference between self-esteem and confidence, because that's something that I feel is really easy to misunderstand.
And I think that there are differences in different places. I think that in America, they put always together confidence and self-esteem almost as the same thing, or they talk about confidence like what I would call self-esteem. And I think that there is a problem with that. If you kind of use those both terms interchangeably and they are not, then the problem is that you cannot actually get proper help, because the improving self-confidence or confidence is very different to self-esteem. And so basically, in terms of what I understand as self-esteem is how you value yourself, how you think about your own worth, and so on. So how you think about yourself, as a person. Common examples of people with low self-esteem is to think of themselves, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I'm weird, I'm stupid, I'm fat and ugly, and so on. So having those kind of certain beliefs about themselves. In terms of confidence is our belief in the skills that we have. So, for example, I've done some presentations at work, and I know that I've got the skills to deliver a good presentation. I still can have a low self-esteem and, for example, go to social situations and worry, oh my God, what people are going to think about me. But I might feel confident in certain situations that I practice them, and I know that I've got the skills to do them. So that's the difference. And with confidence, it is a lot about practice and doing things. And the more times we do it, the better we get, the more confidence we build, the more belief we build in our skills. In self-esteem, it's more doing the inner work and trying to learn how to love yourself, how to think about yourself positively, how to change the negative focus that we might have about our all shortcomings and negative stuff to more focusing on the positive things. Which is not easy to do, but it is achievable. And there is one amazing exercise as well, again in the course, but that deals with that and trains people how to start focusing every day on what kind of positive qualities you have, rather than thinking about your mistakes and failures and so on. So that's the difference. In terms of confidence, you can do some of the things, like, for example, bilateral stimulation to reduce the anxiety that you feel about certain things. And one example I'm thinking about straight away about myself, when I wanted to run a meetup group where I would deliver talks on mental health and just for the local community. And I put that on the meetup website, that this is the group. And I think that first group, there was like 12 people coming that I didn't know, everyone stranger. And English not being my first language as well, that's another slight, concern whether I will be able to express myself clearly and so on. But before I went and delivered the talk, it was talk, chat. We had kind of conversations there as well and discussions. But I did bilateral stimulation on myself. And it took me maybe 10, 15 minutes to reduce any kind of anxieties that I had. And I was able to go there and not worry about it. And then I run the group often with new people coming in and sometimes numbers being much bigger. And I even went to a wellness summit and I delivered a talk, and there was maybe like 50 people in the room. Something that previously I would be mortified, but I used bilateral stimulation to reduce the anxiety. And let's be honest, public speaking, majority of the people, they've got fear of that. So, but you can reduce the anxiety. But I think that the best way would be to combine bilateral stimulation and doing those kind of talks regularly, which I did when I had a meetup group. Those were regular meetings that I ran. And I felt much better at the end, after a few months of running it, much more confident.
That's really interesting. So when it comes to self-worth and confidence, self-worth is more about me as a person, the value I see in myself, and confidence is more about like my abilities, let's say, outside of me. Okay, that's so interesting, and it's really clear to understand it. Is there something that you would want to leave listeners with as we close off?
I always like to add, to people who might be listening to it, that people sometimes feel stuck in their lives or things are not working for them. And I think that if you are listening to this, then think about that there are always solutions. And I do believe that there are always solutions. There are always things that you can do, small things, even like, I don't know, you listening to this today and you don't feel very great, but you can go and make yourself like nice cup of tea, or I'm saying cup of tea because I'm in England, so or I don't know, hot chocolate, or you can, I don't know, stroke your dog, or you can look outside of the window at some beautiful flowers or something like that. So we always can do something to make our life better, and I think that it's worth it to do that and to think about that. I'm a person who my personal philosophy is, how can I make my life happier? How can I make myself to feel the happiness more? And how can I reduce any kind of stresses in life? And that's what my choices in life are guided by. But I think that for people to be aware that you can always do something really small to make your situations better, and it's a good start. So don't be passive, take some actions.
Oh, I love this. Well, thank you for coming on. I will leave all the information, website, links, where people can go and check out what you're doing, maybe work with you, get your courses, things like that. Because from what I saw, they're really, really good. And it makes sense. You have been in area for a while. Well, it was great having you on. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.